Hey Bookish Babes, and welcome to my book nook. For those that are new around here, the name's Franny Barton. I teach elementary music and middle school musical theater, and I also read a bunch of books, thriller and horror, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, all the different types of genres. So if you're interested in that, please like and subscribe down below. It really does help my channel grow. Today's video is long and overdue. I have decided I don't really like doing wrap-up videos. I don't know why. I mean, I want you guys to know what I'm reading and like why I'm reading it and like what I thought of it. But when I think of actually sitting down to film a wrap-up, I just don't want to do it. So I didn't do it in February and I didn't do it in March, and then I couldn't do it in April because I had a baby. So this is a quarterly kind of wrap-up of February, March, and April. And we're also going to talk about where we're going now with wrap-ups because I've figured out what works for me and what you're going to see come May. So, in this video, we're going to really quickly whiz through my stats for February, March, and April. And then I'm just going to really quickly do a minute or less about all of these books, or else we're going to be here forever because it's at least like 25 to 30 books at this point. So we're going to be really quick and efficient with them. And then after that, I'm going to tell you, or actually I'm going to tell you now in a minute what I'm doing going forward with wrap-ups. As far as what you're going to see in May, I got this idea from my friend Neva, and I'm going to be doing vlog style wrap-ups where I come to you immediately after finishing a book with my initial thoughts on it. And if it is already going to be in a vlog for that month, then I will not come with you at as much detail. Like I won't explain what the book is about. And I won't do any of that so that you have to check on the vlog. And I've been doing that for May already, which I've already read 4 books and it's May 5th. I don't even know who I am. Also, apologies, the air just turned on. But I've been doing really well with that and I've really been enjoying it. Now I just need to make sure that I don't like ramble on and on about books, especially if they're like my favorite book, because otherwise that vlog is going to be 5 million years long. But that's what we're going to be doing moving forward. And I think that's going to be great. So you will get a May wrap up from Miss Rainey because I am making it happen. But this one is going to be chaotic and we're here for that chaotic energy. So let's get started because we got a lot to talk about. And if you don't want to see the stats, you can skip right past it. I always timestamp it because you know how I do. And that's where we're at. Now, editing Rainey already knows she's going to hate her life because she has to put up stats for three different things. But I already looked up all the stats and I already have all the pictures ready to go. So editing Rainey, we just gonna do this. All right, let's whiz through this. For February, I read 12 books in total. And the page count that I read was 3,882. As far as for hours listened, I listened to 23.13 hours of audio, and my average rating for the month was a 4-star, which is pretty good. So February was a pretty good reading month. I acquired 9 books this month, and you should have already seen my quarterly book haul where I talked about all the books that I got from January, February, and March. So go check that out if you want to see what books I acquired. I started 4 series, which starting series is never the problem. It's always finishing series for me. I will talk more about the series that I started in just a second though. And I had 2 diverse reads, not actually diverse authors, but diverse reads, because Carrie Soto is about a Latin family, and then Get a Life Chloe Brown, which our main character is Black. And then as far as sources go, I read 7 books, a mixture of audio and physical, because we all know by now that is my favorite way to absorb books. And then I read 3 physically, and I read 2 just as an ebook. For the format, I read 10 novels and 2 novellas, so most of them were chunkier books. And my audience was 9 adult novels and 3 YA, which YA is not really in my wheelhouse that much anymore, but I guess it was for February. And then as far as ratings go, I read 1 1-star, 1 2.5 star, 1 3.5 star, 3 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 4 5 stars. So the most I had was 5 stars, but I did have a 1-star, and we are going to get to that very soon. And then genres, I read 1 fantasy, 1 historical fiction, 2 horror, 1 mystery, 1 nonfiction, 5 romance, and 1 thriller. So I was really in my romance bag in February. Makes sense. Valentine's Day, all that hoopla. And then as far as my author stats, I had read from 5 from before, from Elle Cosimano, Grady Hendrix, Taylor Jenkins Reid, B.A. Paris, and Sarah J. Maas. And there were 3 new to me. Caroline Peckham and Suzanne Valenti, which that was Zodiac Academy, Daniel Volpe, that was Plastic Monsters, and Talia Hibbert, Get a Life Chloe Brown. And then I read 3 authors' debut novels, Jeanette McCurdy, I'm Glad My Mom Died, Ashley Rostek, Find Me, and then Jessa Hastings, Magnolia Parks. And then for series of stats, I caught up on Finlay Donovan, so I read book number 3 in the series. I started Find Me by Ashley Rostek, which is a 4-book series, I believe. I started Zodiac Academy. I read the prequel and book 1 in February. And I started The Brown Sisters. Actually, I read more. I started 4. I started 6 series. Okay, whatever. I started the Magnolia Parks series by Jessa Hastings, and I also started the Throne of Glass series with the prequel novellas, The Assassin's Blade. And then years that I read mainly from 2022. That was the most that I read from. I read 3 from 2019, 2 from 2021, 1 from 2023, 1 from 2018, and 1 from 2014. I read 1 on my Kindle on KU, and 11 of them I physically owned. And then this is the fun thing of like the color covers, because I think that's fun. 4 black, 1 blue, 1 green, 1 orange, 1 purple, 2 white, 2 yellow. And I read from 1 person of color author, and that was Miss Talia Hibbert. And so that is February. So let's just whiz through March and April super quick, and then I'm going to show you all the books that I read, tell you what I gave each one initially, and then we're just going to dive into each one a minute or less. All right, March monthly stats. For March, I read 8 books and I had 2 DNFs. Pages read was 3,003, and the hours listened was 25.26, so I read less books but listened to more audio. My average rating was a 3.6, so that fell a little low this month, and I acquired 8 books in the month of March. I started 2 series, fun stuff. I had 3 diverse reads. I read Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and I read the first book in the Godfather series by Nuha Julian. And then my sources, I read 5 as a mixture of audio and physical, 1 was a physical read, 1 was an ebook, 1 was an audiobook, for 8 novels in total. And I read from 7 adult books and 1 middle grade book, that was the Amari book. As for my ratings for March, I had 2 2-stars, 1 3-star, 2 4-stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 1 5-star. So only 1 book actually made its way to the 5-star mark for March. My genres were 2 fantasy, 1 mystery, 1 romance, and 4 thrillers. So I was really in my thriller game for March again. As far as authors I've read from before, I had read from Lucy Foley, Sherry Lapina, Zodia Stage, and CJ Tudor. There was 1 new to me, which was Ruth Ware. I had never read a book from her yet. And I had 4 debut author books. B.B. Alston for Amari and the Night Brothers, Nuha Julian for the Diavolos book, Sangu Mandana for The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and Stuart Turton for The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which was a DNF. And then as far as my series stats go, I started the Amari and the Night Brothers series, the first book, and I started the Godfather series, the Diavolos series. So I started 2 series. And the years I read from are pretty standard. 1 from 2014, 1 from 2018, 2 from 2020, 1 from 2021, 1 from 2022, and 2 from 2023. So I am trying to prioritize 2022 and 2023 reads still. I read 1 as an ARC on my Kindle. The rest I all owned physically because I love to own my books. And the color covers, there were 4 blue, 1 white, 2 gray, and 1 black. And as far as authors, I did read from 3 people of color for March, and that was B.B. Alston, Nuha Julian, and Sangu Mandana. And so those are my March stats. And then let's just really quick whiz through April. As far as April, I only read 6 books. Makes sense, I had a baby halfway through April. Pages read 2,123. Hours listened 29.53. I was really starting to get more on the audiobook train, apparently. My average rating is back up to a 4-star, so I was really enjoying what I did read in April. I acquired 21 books this month. Yeah, I know that was a lot. You're going to see a very big haul coming soon. I started 1 series. I read from 0 diverse reads this month, which was not good. But I read 6 as a mixture of audio and physical because that's my favorite. I read 6 novels, and they were all adult. And my ratings go, I had 2 3-stars, 1 3.5 star, 1 4.5 star, and 2 5 stars. So at least 1/3 of it was 5 stars. That's pretty good. My genres were 1 horror, 2 romance, and 3 thriller. So romance and thriller are still normally the ones I read the most. As far as author stats go, I read 3 from before, Geneva Rose, Grady Hendrix, and Sophie Lark. There were 2 new to me. I read K.A. Tucker, The Simple Wild, Sally Hepworth, The Soulmate, and 1 debut author, Julia Bartz, for The Writing Retreat. For my series stats, I started The Simple Wild series by K.A. Tucker, and I continued on with the Brutal Birthright series with the second book, Stolen Heir, by Sophie Lark. As far as years I read from, 1 was 2018, 1 was 2022, and 4 was 2023. And the books that I read from, I owned all of them. Do you see a pattern with this? I love owning all the books that I read. And my color covers were 1 black, 1 white, 2 gray, 1 blue, and 1 green. And as I said earlier, I didn't read from any authors of color, people of color this month, which was not my favorite, but It can't be helped. Okay, we're done with all the stats for February, March, and April. Now I'm just going to really quickly say all of the books that I read in the order that I read them in, the rating I gave them, and then after that, we're just going to talk through each one for a minute or less. And I'm kidding you not, like I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to be efficient with this shit. I know I said I was going to do it in order in which I read, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go for it, and whatever book you see is the book that you get. Okay, here we go. I read Magnolia Parks, which was a 5-star. How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, which was a 3-star. Baby Teeth by Zoya Stage, which was a 4.5-star. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mondano, which was a 4.5-star. The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which was a 4.5-star. We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix, which was a whopping 1-star. Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which was a 4.5-star. Zodiac Academy, The Awakening by Caroline Peckham and Suzanne Valenti, which was a 4-star. And then also Zodiac Academy, Origins of an Academy Bully, my gosh, I can't talk, also a 4-star. Mothered by Zoya Stage, which was a 2-star. Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston, which was a 4-star. The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which was a DNF, also for my besties book club, which wasn't good. One by One by Ruth Ware, which was a 2-star. The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, which was a 3-star. Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina, which was a 4-star. Get a Life Chloe Brown, which was a 3.5-star. The Prisoner by B.A. Paris, which was a 2-star. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which was a 5-star. Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun, which was a 4-star. And Me by Ashley Rostek, which was a 5-star. Plastic Monsters by Daniel Volpe, which was a 2-star. Diavolos by Nuha Julien, which was a 5-star. The Riding Retreat by Julia Bartz, which was a 3-star. The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, which was a 5-star. The Soulmate by Sally Hepworth, which was a 4.5-star. Soul and Heir by Sophie Lark, which was a 5-star. And You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose, which was a 3.5-star. So those were all of the books that I read between February, March, and April, and now I'm going to just grab a book, see it, give you my spiel on it in a minute or less, and move on from life. Like I said, we're not going in any order. I'll at least tell you the month that I got it in. So I read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz in April as part of the Literally Dead book club for Books and Lala, and I gave it a 3-star. Why? Because it was a very unhinged book. I thought that, first off, it had a lot of like weird just stuff in it, and I can't really say what about it because otherwise that'll give it away. But about these women that are participating in a writing retreat, and the woman that's hosting the writing retreat is very unhinged, and some crazy shit happens, and it just goes off the rails from there. And it had a couple of twists and things that happened that I just was not about, and it was kind of boring to me. And just the further we got into this book, the further it just began to spiral and unwind from there. And so it wasn't that I hated my time reading this, it just wasn't my favorite thing that I'd ever read. So honestly, this would have gone in the disappointments section of this vlog because it was a little disappointing. I thought it was going to be better than it was. But it is what it is. We had The Prisoner by B.A. Paris, which I read in February for the Pretty Girls Book Club, hosted by Haley Hughes for her Patreon, and this book was a hard no. Behind Closed Doors was a 5-star, this was a 2-star. And it started off really, really well. Like, I would say there was a part 1 and a part 2. Part 1 was a 5 stars. I was loving it, I was enjoying it, everything, we were vibing. And then we got to part 2. And I don't even fully still understand what happened in this novel because the end was so convoluted and made no sense. Like, I didn't understand why we went there. And this book could have been so much better if part 2 just didn't exist, quite honestly. And so none of us enjoyed it on the live stream. In fact, we kind of tore it to shreds because the second part was just ridiculous. The stuff that happened in this book was dumb. It didn't make sense. And I can't even believe that the same person that wrote Behind Closed Doors wrote this book, if I'm gonna be honest. Like, this was hot garbage. And I would not recommend. Then we have An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lapina, which I read in March when I was reading all of my Agatha Christie retellings for my Agatha Christie vlog, which I must say, I spent a lot of time on. So if you have not watched that yet, please go watch that vlog. I will link it underneath this video. But this was one of the better retellings that I enjoyed. I do like Sherry Lapina's writing. I think it's very quick and very easy to get through. So, like I said, this is an isolated setting. There's a bunch of people staying all together in a cabin that don't seem to know each other, but then one ends up dead and then more are ending up dead. And it's like, does anyone actually know each other? Are they lying? And I thought it was very good. I love the pacing of her books. The only thing that was confusing in this was the number of characters and how they all sounded the same on the audiobook. And so that was a little hard to differentiate between different people until I really knew what was going on. But like I said, I really enjoyed this one. I thought the ending was a little interesting, which is why I gave it a 4 out of 5, but I still had a solid time with this book. Then for that same vlog, we read The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley, which I only gave 3 stars. I've given The Guest List 5 stars. I've given The Paris Apartment 3.5 stars, so this was definitely my least favorite of hers. However, this was her debut, but this is basically like a rinse and repeat of The Guest List, only the Guest List, she had much better writing skills by that point. This one was just kind of okay. I mean, I do love the way that she writes. I will say, like, I can read through a Lucy Foley book really quick because she just has that sort of writing style that, like, appeals to me. I didn't really care for any of the characters. They were all kind of annoying. And, like, yeah, they were all, like, rich socialite, which normally, like, works for me. But I don't know. In this one, it just didn't. And I didn't really care for the ending. I didn't really care for, like, all of the stuff that happened in this book. So it was just middle of the road for me. I probably would still recommend it, though. We got to one of my least favorite ones in that Agatha Christie retellings vlog, and that was One by One by Ruth Ware, which is unfortunate because this is the only Ruth Ware book I've ever read. However, I went into it knowing I might not like it, and a lot of people said, don't make this like your impression on Ruth Ware as a writer, because this is not a very good one. To which I agree. She told you who the killer was basically like 20 pages in, and I didn't seem to catch that, and I'm kind of annoyed. One, that she did that, and two, that I didn't catch it. But regardless, there was just way too much about the political talk of the actual like company that is being like discussed in this book. And you'll know what I mean if you read this. It's called Snoop, I believe. It's like some Spotify music type playlist-y company. There was too much talk about that. And there was just, I don't know, the like last 60 pages of this book honestly didn't need to exist because you already knew who the killer was and it had all been resolved. And then it was like a 60-page epilogue essentially that didn't need to exist. And so that brought it down a lot. But this book was not for me. Then we have Amari and the Night Brothers by Phoebe Alston. I read this for the boy band's readathon that I hosted back in February. I also read it because it was a buddy read with Neva and Brittany, and we all very much enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars only because, like, for middle grade to get a 5-star, it would have had to, like, razzle-dazzle me. But this was still fantastic for what it was. I had such a magical time with this. Like, the way that this was written was so great. I couldn't stop reading it. I cannot wait to pick up the second book and then the third book in the series. Like, seriously, this was so good. And I went into this not expecting to like it because it is middle grade. But, like, I've also went into it knowing I might like it because nobody has said this is a bad book. And you can't, because if you read this, you just get happy feelings while you're reading it. It was just so good. I can't even say enough about this book. So if you're not a middle grade person, but you've been seeing this around, I would recommend you pick it up because I just had a blast with this book and it was just a great time. Okay, then we're going to talk about these next 2 books in tandem, and that is Zodiac Academy The Awakening, which is book 1 in the series, and then the prequel, which I read after, based off of the reading order recommendation that the authors suggest. So I'm going off of what the authors say. And so they said read this and then the prequel, to which I agree with this because, so this book follows our 2 Gemini sisters as they finally are like realizing who they are in this magical world, and they're going to the Zodiac Academy to find out more about themselves and whatnot. And there was a lot of character buildup and world building and all this stuff in this book. This prequel discusses a specific relationship between a professor and a student at the school. And they have a very interesting relationship in this book. This book explains why their relationship is the way that it is, and it takes place 5 years before the events of this book. And I think this is extremely important to read after you already know about the 2 characters, because I was much more attached to what was going on in this situation, and I felt a lot more compassion for the characters in this book upon reading this second. And so I do agree that you should do the author's order. And I know some people are like, well, you should read it in whatever. I did it the way that they said. But this was fantastic. And I remember I read this in like one sprint and I absolutely loved it. I loved both of these, quite honestly. They weren't 5-star reads for me, but I am really excited to continue on. I mean, it is a very YA series. Like, as you're reading this, it's very much YA. But I did really like it. I can't wait to continue the series, but I would recommend to do the author's reading order and read this and then this. Then let's talk about Carrie Soto is Back, which I read for my boy band's readathon back in February, and I also read it because Taylor Jenkins Reid is like one of my favorite authors, so I figured I finally needed to get around to her newest book, and I gave it 4.5 stars. There was a lot of tennis in this book, not gonna lie, but I was very surprised that did not hold me back from my love of this book. It was a very good book. I will also say, I was not offended by the representation in this book. And I am half Cuban. And I know that there are some people, some Hispanic readers that read this and went, I did not appreciate this at all. I was not bothered by it. And that's just my opinion. And my opinion is valid for the book experience that I had with it. But I loved this book. I seriously love anything that she could write. I think she did a great job between like talking about the tennis stuff that she needed to, because this book does center around an ex-tennis star trying to like break her title or break her championship again. And also just like the relationship between her dad in this book and like her friend. It was such a good book. I'm telling you, Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors for a reason. She knows how to write a book, and I will love each and every book that she ever writes. I've never given anything less than a 4-star she is a queen in my eyes. Then we have The Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark, which is the second book in the Brutal Birthright series, which I am currently reading, which is a mafia romance series. And this one is a captor-captive romance that's basically a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it's the most accurate Beauty and the Beast retelling that I have ever seen. I very much appreciated this book. I loved it so much. I didn't love it as much as Brutal Prince. I mean, they both got 5 stars, but this would be like, honestly, if we're really thinking about it, a 4.75, and Brutal Prince is a 5. This was so good. This follows our Polish mafia boy, Mikołaj, and he steals Callum Griffin, who's the guy in Brutal Prince, his youngest daughter, or not his daughter, youngest sister, Nessa, who's like this little ballerina girl. And it's their story, and like I said, it's Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it was so cute, and I loved it so much, and I just love the way Miss Sophie Lark writes. And I had to just buy the last 4 in this series with the Hot Boy covers off her website because she just got bought out by Bloom Publishing, and as soon as those new covers release, she can't sell these anymore. So now I will finally have acquired all of my hot guy covers. And I'm very excited about that. Up next, we have The Simple Wild by K.A. Tucker, which I read as a buddy read with my friends Brittany, Neva, and Kelsey. And actually, no, Neva didn't join us, just Brittany and Kelsey. And we all gave this 5 stars. It was fabulous. I am so excited to continue on with this series. And so this one follows a girl whose dad lives in Alaska. Her and her mom, her mom and him ended up breaking up, and he stayed in Alaska to continue to be a pilot. And then he ends up having like an life-altering injury, and she has to go visit him, and she ends up falling in love with another guy who is also a pilot. And it's like, is she going to repeat the same mistakes that her mom and dad made? And it was so good. The steam in this was fantastic. I loved the relationship between her and Jonah. It was truly a grumpy sunshine man and like a positive woman. And it was just so good. I thought it was so cute. I couldn't stop reading it as soon as I started it. I cannot wait. I already have the second book on deck, and you better believe I'm going to read it soon because this was a gem. Don't sleep on it. Next, let's talk about You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. I'm not gonna lie, this may have been my most anticipated read of the year because I love me some Geneva Rose. I haven't read The Perfect Marriage by her yet, but I did read One of Us is Dead, and I gave it a 4.5 star, which is still one of my favorite books from last year. And there was only one reason that I got a 4.5 star, but I loved that book. It was like rich people, drama, and it was exactly everything that I was asking for in a book. However, this one was 3.5 stars, and it kind of missed the mark because, well, it was a little something something. That is all I'm going to say. I'm kidding. It had a lot more romance in it than I anticipated. It was very cringe, and there was a twist at the end that I was like, no. First off, it happened 4 pages before the end, so there was no resolution to this. Second, I was like, you didn't set that up at all for that twist to, like, be a thing? So I'm just like, no, ma'am. No. Swerve, hard swerve, actually. So yeah, that was a little upsetting. I still flew through it super fast because I do like the way that Geneva Rose writes, but I don't know. I've not been hearing fabulous things about this. This is definitely not the best book of hers by far, but I will read more by her because I do really like her. Also, her Instagram is fantastic. Just to follow her and her husband alone, I highly recommend. Up next is Sally Hepworth's The Soulmate, which I read in April for the Pretty Girls Book Club hosted by Haley Hughes, and I loved it. It was a 4.5 star. It was very polarizing. Half of us loved it and half of us hated it. I loved it. She has a fantastic writing style. Her writing style is for me. I opened this book and immediately went, wow, I love the way that she writes. It's just like when you open a book and the writing style is there, it's all vibes. And I'm not gonna lie, this is very character driven, not very plot intensive. Honestly, nothing much happens from the very beginning and you already know what is gonna happen like 10 pages in. But that didn't deter me from having a fabulous time with this book. I just really, really liked this book. And I gave it a 4.5 star just because of the ending, like, honest, and because of the nothing really happened. But it was so good. I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to read her backlist now. I actually just picked up The Good Sister recently, and I know she has another book before that. And I don't know why I had thought that I wouldn't like her books, but if her other books are like this, then I know I'm going to have a fabulous time with them. Up next we have I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, the only nonfiction book that I have read this year so far. I know, I'm really slacking on it, but it is what it is. I read it in February for my boy band's readathon, and it was a 5 star. I don't normally rate memoirs and stuff, but like this was a 5 star, so I will rate it that. It was such a good book. The stuff that she has gone through is so upsetting and so traumatizing, and I don't know how she managed to craft such an eloquently worded book, but it was beautiful, and the audiobook was fantastic because she narrates it, which means it's fan-friggin-tastic. And I had such a fun time with this book. Oh, not fun time. I flew through it. Like I did make sure to read it in like a day because I knew I couldn't sit on like sad content like that for very long. but it was so fun, and I'm so glad I read it, and that's all I'm going to say on it. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend, but please check trigger warnings, because there are a bunch for this. Then we have Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which I read by Talia Hibbert, which I read in February for Rom-Comathon, and it was just a 3-star for me. It was a middle-of-the-road romance. However, I've heard that if you don't love Chloe Brown, you'll still love Danny Brown and Eve Brown, and so I am going to continue on with this series. But this one I already knew might not be my jam because I started it a year prior and got to like 50 pages in and not right nowed it because it just wasn't the time. And I was starting to feel that again when I got there again, but I made myself push through and I did enjoy it. There was some good smut, a good time, but it just was. It wasn't, like, I wasn't exactly bought or invested in their romance. Like, I don't know. I didn't buy it. I didn't feel like there was enough tension build up. It was just okay. I would still recommend it. I do think it had amazing chronic pain representation or chronic illness representation, so I do agree with that statement, but it was just okay. And that's all I have to say on the matter. Then we had The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, which I did DNF. I was supposed to read this in March for my besties book club, and all of us DNF'd it except for one, and Brittany really enjoyed it, and the rest of us did not. I don't know what didn't work for me in this. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for a mystery, probably because I had just read all of the Agatha Christie retellings, and so this was just not something that I was even considering picking up at the moment. But I only got like 70 pages in. I might try this again one day, but not anytime soon. And then while we're talking about DNFs, we might as well talk about the only other book that I DNF'd in March, and that was The Drift by CJ Tudor. I was looking really excited to this because I had read The Other People by her, and I had really enjoyed that. However, this was boring as all get out. I probably only got like 8% in before I DNF'd, and that's really impressive for me because I do not DNF easily. Like, it takes me a while to DNF a book, but I just wasn't vibing. It was following 3 different characters, all in different isolated snow settings, and 2 of the situations sounded exactly the same, so I couldn't differentiate between any of them, and I just wasn't about it, and so that is what it is. It was not for me. Then we have Mothered by Zoya Stage, which was one of 2 books that I read by her in a Zoya Stage taste test that I did back in March with my friend Haley Hughes. And this was a 2-star. It was not good. It is a pandemic book, which I didn't know that going in. That didn't deter me per se, but that wasn't like, ooh, I'm running and jumping and itching to get to it. But it was not very good. So it follows a mom and a daughter who have to live together due to the pandemic, and the daughter catfishes people for fun, but like it's also having a bunch of like flashbacks and like weird panic attacks about her twin sister who died when she was younger, and how is this all related, and the catfishing stuff didn't seem to make sense. I don't know why that was a part of the story, and the flashbacks were so severe. She's a very unreliable narrator to the point where you didn't realize that you were in a flashback until like 3 pages in, and I went, oh, this is not real life right now, this is her dreaming. And so for that alone, I could not recommend it. And then the ending was just stupid. Nothing happened in this book. I kid you not. Like, nothing literally happened in this book. Don't read it. If you were going to, just don't. Then we had We Sold Our Souls by Mr. Grady Hendrix. And if we don't know by now, I have a very hit or miss relationship with him. And this was a 1-star. Probably the worst book I've read this year so far, if I'm being honest. It started out meh. I started it out and I was like, okay, I'm not vibing with it, but maybe it'll get better. And then it just went downhill from there to the point where I couldn't even understand what was going on. I didn't care, and I was speeding through the audiobook just to finish it. And the only reason I finished it was because it was the buddy read that I chose for my team for the Boy Band Readathon, and it was going to get us a lot of points. And I've already openly apologized to my team for making them listen to this because it was awful. But yeah, would not recommend. I hate it. I don't know why I keep picking up Grady Hendrix books, but I do. And it's not always a good time. Then we had The Assassin's Blade by Sarah J. Maas, which is the prequel to the Throne of Glass series. It is a mix, or it is a compilation, oh my gosh, I can't talk, of 5 different novellas that basically take place before Throne of Glass happens and shows you about Selena Sardathian, which is like this young teen girl assassin. And we are reading it in chronological order, so not publication order, because this came out after the 3rd book. And it was a 4.5 star, and I had a really great time with it. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not because the first novella was just kind of for me, but every novella after that got better and better until like the last 3 were 5 stars. And I had a really great time with this. I really do appreciate having read this before reading Throne of Glass because it allowed me to like get to know Selena a little bit better and like understand how she got to where she is in the first book, because the first book picks up right where this book leaves off. And I know some people will say like, oh, you should have read this after this, but like it's whatever. You can read it in whatever reading order you want, and I really enjoyed where we read it. Then we have The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and I thought this was going to be a 5-star cozy fantasy. It was a 4.5 star. I'm not going to lie. I honestly thought about DNFing it at 80 pages in because it was just not holding, it was not having an effect on me. And my friends were all like, oh, you have to keep pushing through. This book is fabulous. You're going to love it. Please don't give up on it. And I am very glad to say that I didn't give up on it because it was good. And it is a warm and witchy hug of a book. It just took me a minute to get into it. It took me a while to get into it, but I had a great time with it. It definitely is a cozy fantasy read. I thought it was so cute. Mika is so adorable. The Grumpy Sunshine relationship in here is also good. I really do stan a Grumpy Sunshine relationship, in case you didn't know that. And it was a fabulous time. So I'm very glad that I got to this book. I read it for Buzzword for Books and Lala. Then up next, we have Baby Teeth by Zoya Stage, which was the other book that I read, which is a creepy child book. That is the whole reason that we read from her in the first place, because I love me a creepy child story. And I don't know what that says, knowing that I have a child. Well, I have 2 children now. But I love creepy children books. They don't even faze me a little bit. And this one was a 4.5 star, only because I thought it was going to go a lot deeper and more evil in the ending, and it didn't. It was just kind of mild and more reserved, and I wasn't about that. But this book from the start really hooked me, and what I loved about this book was that we got the perspective of the evil child, which I have never seen in an evil child book as of yet. And so that was really great because it actually allows you to realize, wow, this child really is evil, and get her intentions behind her evil actions. So if you're going to read an evil child book, this is one that I would highly, highly recommend. Then up next we have How to Sell a Haunted House by Mr. Grady Hendrix, and this was a 3-star. I actually went into this a lot more hopeful because I was really enjoying the first 100 pages of this book, and everyone was telling me, oh, it's a 5-star, oh, it's a 5-star, oh, it's a 5-star. However, I know my relationship with Mr. Grady Hendrix, so I still went in a little anticipating of that, or hesitant of that. And then we got to the weird puppet shit, and it all went downhill from there. I'm not about puppets. I'm not about a puppet named Pumpkin, or Pupkin, whatever his name was. And I am not about them basically becoming a main character in this book, and then having to listen to their annoying ass voice throughout the whole rest of the audiobook. I'm not about it. I'm not saying I can't love puppets. I'm just saying it didn't work for me in this book. I do think this is a great book on grief horror, and I do really like how it ended, but it's just not for me. It was not for me. I am so glad I read it, but Pupkin is a no. No to Pupkin. Then we have what was my favorite book of the year so far, but I have just read a book in May that has surpassed it, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. You'll see it in a reading vlog very, very soon. And that is Magnolia Parks by Miss Jessa Hastings, as you can tell, as I've annotated the heck out of it. And I'm currently reading book number 2, Daisy Hates, right now. This book is fantastic. It is everything that I wanted normal people to be that it wasn't, if we're going to be honest, because I hated normal people. I love this book. It is a very toxic relationship between Magnolia and BJ, and they are all like posh socialite people, like extremely posh, like celebrity status posh. And it was just so good, and it's all about their very toxic relationship, and it's basically the subtitle is, How Many Loves Do You Get in a Lifetime? Anyway, I loved this book. I could gush on and on about this forever, and you are going to see me gush about this in a Magnolia Parks universe vlog at some point when I finish the series. But just know that I annotated the heck out of it. I loved it so much. It was everything I could have wanted normal people to be and more by Miss Sally Rooney. And it is still in my favorites for this year, without a doubt. And then we have just a couple left. Yay, let's hurry through. We have Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun, which was a 4-star. I still really enjoyed this book, but it wasn't as good as the first 2 books. If we're being honest, I feel like this was just a very big filler book. I don't really agree with what happened in this book. This was the one where they follow, like, they're all at a police academy, and, like, the stuff that happened wouldn't have happened at a real police academy. You wouldn't have just let random civilians do this sort of thing. It was just wild and crazy. And, I mean, the books get crazier and crazier, and there's going to be 7 books in this series. And so I'm sure it's just going to get more wild as we go. But also, she needs to pick she needs to pick someone to love already. We need to get out of this love triangle. I'm kind of done with it at this point. This was definitely my least favorite of the 3, but it was still a 4-star, and I had a great time with it. I love Miss Finlay, and I always will. Then we had Find Me by Ashley Rostak, which this is a reverse harem book, and I had never read that before, and so it is about 1 girl and 4 brothers, and I wasn't sure if I was going to love this or not, but Neva told me I had to read it. And everybody else read, like, all 3 books in succinct order, or, like, in succession. And I just haven't gotten to that yet because, you know, pregnant life and all of that when I was reading them. This was fantastic. I loved it so much. And I feel kind of weird admitting that I loved it because like it's 4 brothers with 1 girl and I was interested in how that was going to play out. But it is so good, and it's also like half thrilling because she's like running away from like this person that murdered her whole family. And so it's like thrilling and romance all packed into one, which is my favorite. Honestly, I love a good thriller romance read. And so I very much enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that Neva told me to read it, and I can't wait to read the other 2 books. And there's another one coming out this year. Gotta be done with them by August. I gotta hurry. Then we had Plastic Monsters by Danielle Volpe, which was a horror novella that I read for Reading Riley's book club, which I learned her book club is just not for me. I've really hated every book that I've read for that book club so far, so I'm not partaking in it anymore. It's just weird horror, and I just am not a weird horror girly, I've learned. This was a novella, and it was a 2-star. It was written by a man who's writing from a woman's perspective, but he clearly doesn't know how to do that. The stuff that he's saying about women and how we view our bodies is not how I agree. I think it was just awful. I would not recommend it. It was also an extreme horror, which I was not expecting. I thought it was just horror, and then it went really dark, really fast. It just wasn't for me. I don't want to spend any more time talking about it. Didn't like it. Then we had The Diavolos, which is the first book in the Godfather series by Nuha Julienne, and I loved this book. I got it as an ARC. I signed up for it, and I'm so glad that I read it. It was fan-freaking-tastic. I cannot believe that she wrote this as a debut. It was a mafia romance, and I loved everything about it. It had a stalker in it. It had 2 other perspectives. It was so good. I loved everything about it. I'm learning that mafia romances are like my jam, and I really appreciate them. And I'm so very glad that I read this book. I cannot wait for book 2 to come out. I need to ask her when book 2 is coming out because like we talk on Instagram a lot. She's super cool. I will link to her underneath here. But please read this book if you haven't. If you love a good mafia romance and you love a good enemies to lovers and like the different clans and all of that, I thought it was fan-freaking-tastic. And that is all the books. We did it. We did it, friends, in 30 minutes. I did it. I'm sorry that this took 5 million years and this is a long vlog, so watch at your own risk. But that was February, March, and April. And that's never going to happen again because your homegirl's doing the wrap-up vlog style for May. With that, I'm going to let you go. I do not want to talk anymore. I don't want to hear myself talk anymore. I hope you had fun with this, and I will see you guys in a video very, very soon.